welcome back to Studioloo. It's Cindy. I'm going to do a little bit more work today on the standard textbook of cosmetology, or as I'm affectionately calling it, the Beauty School Dropout journal. Just a disclaimer, my hands look a total wreck of black ink. It's for something fun though. I'll be showing it to you later. So I'm truly a beauty school dropout in that this is never going to be like a hand manicurist kind of channel. So, yep, just a little warning there. If dirty looking hands scare you, you may want to scroll on by. But if not, we can do something fun. So I'm thinking of continuing some work. I want to make a tag to go in this pocket. I did a little more work on this journal yesterday. I created a belly band and a journal card to go in there, and I'll go through this at length in my flip through and talk about this. And there's a tag in here with a pocket. I think that's all I did that we didn't do together, because we did this together. So I've had a few comments and questions about just different things, and I wanted to address. So I'm working on the signatures right now, creating all the ephemera before I sew in the signatures. So when I go to sew in the signatures, I'm going to take all the ephemera out and just sew the pages in, then I'll add it all back in afterward. You can make a journal in a lot of different ways, and I used to always just get the papers selected and put them in and then work in the journal. Like I'd stitch them into the journal, then decide how I wanted to do the page layouts. I still do that sometimes, but I've started to favor working on the individual signatures alone, because I can take the pages out, do what I want. If you put everything in the journal, you have to kind of do it in steps. Like if I decide I wanted to stitch lace on here or glue lace on here, I would have to do that like before I put everything in the book, right? So you have to work in stages. A couple questions I was asked is, do I glue or do I stitch lace onto the paper? So it really depends. I do both. Sometimes if the paper is vintage or quite thin, like just standard copy paper weight, I will typically glue it on because it's easy to pierce your paper and tear it when you're stitching. One thing that I do is when I'm stitching lace on directly to paper, I use a single stitch, just like, you know, your standard one stitch, like one needle straight stitch, and I also max out the length of the stitch. I don't keep it really tiny because then it really does a lot of perforating. So yeah, that's one thing. So I will typically glue it on thin paper, stitch it on thicker paper. I will also stitch it on thinner paper if it's like a clustery type thing I'm putting on. And if it wraps around the page, which I do that as well sometimes, or if it's a ruffle, then it has a little bit more, I'd say, like support. So if you're stitching a ruffle onto paper, you're probably a little safer as long as you go in enough so that you're not right on the edge of the paper, because the ruffle will take the bruntness of the, like that needle pounding down. It won't be hitting the paper so hard, if that makes sense. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of like signatures in general. How do you build them? How do you select them? So what I do is, if I decide on a theme, and a lot of my journals do have themes. I do a lot of commonplace books as well that just have random things. I did a lot of traveler's notebooks that way that I really loved. But in this case, I'm working in a theme, so I will collect books that work with that theme in some way, and I try to get creative. I don't just, you know, if I'm making a bird book, or like, I don't usually keep my theme that basic. So in this case, right, I had this vintage cosmetology book, so I started to write a story. I started to think about the woman who gave me this book, and I imagined kind of a life for her, like what her life was like when she was young, the era she was living in at the time, the kind of messages that she'd be getting. What would be her dreams, her secrets, her private things that she would want in a journal. You know, not like scandalous by any sense, but what I imagined for her is like, you know, like a fun kind of high school life that was a little traditionalist at the time, because I'm sure she was growing up in, you know, like the 50s, and, you know, so maybe she was into cheerleading. Maybe she liked, you know, she had a few boy crushes. She liked pastel-y kind of colors. She was looking at going to beauty school, but she also had a bit of a a feminist bent. She was educated. She was smart. You know, and she was maybe an entrepreneur. She liked some pretty things. She was also artsy, you know, so I start to kind of build, and then I think about what could I include in this book. So things like yearbooks, right? Because that could talk about her school career. Maybe this lady was her beauty school teacher. Maybe she was a high school principal that really helped this girl. You know, she was a cheerleader maybe, or she just had friends on the team, or, you know, she was really into fashion icons. She liked pink. She also liked flowers. Maybe she had like someone who did textile in her life, like her grandmother. You know, like you just kind of build the story. So that's kind of about the story. Then when you're making the signatures themselves, to select the pages, right? In this theme, I went to yearbooks. I went to a vintage hairstyling book that I got. Whenever I get a book of that nature, right, I start to build ideas around it. What kind of books can it go into? And that's also a way that I'm very selective when I'm thrifting these days, to try not to build up too much of a big hoard of books. I won't lie, I have quite a book hoard, which I already did have because I have a library in my house and I'm already a huge lover of books, reading art books, you know, so for that reason, I'm trying not to be excessive in what I collect for journals. I try to make sure I can use it. So when you buy something like a yearbook, think about the different kinds of journals or ephemera that you would want to make from that. Think of different themes that you could create. So what I then did was like, okay, I can use yearbooks, anything about beauty. I'm also using some vintage fashion magazines that, you know, you can get those commonly at thrift stores. You can also like use magazines from this era. You could use things that are the same kind of colors. You know, anything you want to tell a story. Maybe in your story, maybe she really liked classic cars, so you could get a classic car calendar or, you know, something like that. So like you can tell her story. So then when I go to build the signature, I start with, I usually pick what's going to be like my theme, or not my theme, but like my main paper for the book. Often it's tea-dyed paper if what I'm going for is just a vintage look. In this case, I chose my pink and teal dyed paper that I dyed to go with this book. Those were the colors I was looking for, like a pink and teal, pink and blue kind of feeling. So I dyed these papers specifically for this book. When I was doing my Tuesday 10, I made these because I had torn out a page of a yearbook for something else I was making. And so I thought of these tabs right away, that these could be like, you know, the boys and her, you know, her crush, kind of like her high school crushes or something. Then I always, when possible, use some of the original pages from the vintage book. So in this case, I'm so lucky to have such a beautiful book because the pages are really useful. So that's how I select the pages, and the way that I lay the signatures out is I typically will start the signature with a sturdy page. This is scrapbook paper. You don't always have to. In fact, the front page of this signature, I'm using the first page of this book. And one thing I do in my journals, I try to do, is to maintain those book plate images, the copyright statements, those kind of things. So I can put that back in the book so that you know what you're getting is like truly an old book that's been reimagined. So then once I've built that first page, I usually go kind of a blank paper, then an interesting paper that could be from the original book or not. And that way you mix up writing space that is standard on a page and, you know, interesting pages. So it's like one and then interesting, another one of something then interesting. I do typically try to put some little special thing in the center of signatures, but not always. Sometimes I just don't, because overall the book is special. So then when I'm thinking about how I want to put ephemera in, so typically the front page, I will always make it a little busy with ephemera. It's kind of like the intro to the next chapter of your book. And also one thing I've done many times is I use them almost like visual chapter headings of a story that I'm telling. So maybe you're talking about someone's life who went from, you know, bad to good. So you will start out with darker tones in the papers, darker images, you know, things that are kind of darker in their lives. And then, you know, the next chapter, you'll start to brighten things up a little. You'll show, you know, some hopeful things. And then by the end, you're showing this story that's been turned around. And you can do that with things like children's books. So many fairy tales are so dark, and then there's so many happy endings. So you can add elements of fairy tale books to so many themes. Like I could have taken this journal in a whole other direction. Maybe it could have been about a tumultuous housewife relationship or something, and you know, she finds herself again after she gets rid of 100 pounds of weight, and that was her husband or something, right? Who knows? So you can tell whatever story you like. So that being said, balancing the ephemera is another kind of thing I wanted to mention. And it's, so once you get that first page, what I typically do, these days I'm trying not to make super gator mouth journals. Sometimes I still will. It's like where my heart takes me. And some of my customers actually, that's what they want. That's all they want. They're probably not going to buy something that's not really bulked up with ephemera. People love ephemera, and I understand that. It's like an individual piece of art. So you will find opinions all over the board about that. So what I do is I normally start with a busy page, then I'll give a page of writing space. In a busier book, I would add ephemera to any of these pages that are really busy, that I want to, you know, maybe I want to see this image, but I want to put a pocket down here because this isn't important to me. But in this case, I'm not trying to jam this journal up totally with too much ephemera. So I want to just preserve these pages. They are themselves like the ephemera. So, you know, we've got writing space, we've got vintage pages, and we've got now another busy page of ephemera. Then you'll see that that's repeated, another vintage page. Sorry, that's just the back of this page. Then another writing page. Then I've done a pocket that's busy with a tag. Then I've got this vintage page, then my center that's just pretty plain, and then I've added a belly band with ephemera, and I've done it on a busy page. Then a writing page, you know, so I'm kind of like balancing what I do so that there's a lot of writing space. I love this page. I made a flip out from it because it was just so cool. And then, yeah, that's sort of how I think about my signature. You know, you really will tailor it to your own style because it will also depend on how bulky your style is. If you end up being someone who only likes to make ephemera that feels really like, you know, firm, like 3 layers of paper, and I understand that, or if you're someone who's okay with tucking something like this, maybe with just some thin paper on the back in, or, you know, something like this just as is, then you'll have thinner signatures, right? So it will all depend on your personal style, but those are just some thoughts from me on how I build signatures. So from time to time, I will also just take all my signatures and I'll kind of check where I am, you know. So right now, you'll see here's 3 signatures that have, one is almost done, the other 2 are done. So you can kind of see the difference in the bulk between, oops, let me get in frame. Am I back far enough? Okay, so these 3 are done or almost done, and these 2 are not done. So you'll see the difference here. Sorry, I recently moved my camera and I can never figure out where I'm square. So you see the difference. So when we put them all together, I take a look at, you know, where I am in the book. What's it going to look like? It's still really good. I'm still really happy with that. And I don't think we're going to be too out of control. I think we'll have a little bit of the cover sitting up, but it's not going to be like, you know, a big gator mouth. And that's what I'm going for. With this one anyways. Next one could be, you know, a crazy tome, because I do all the things. You never know what's going to come out of here. I don't know that I'm very consistent in my style right now, and also I don't know that I want to be. I think I like the freedom to do whatever I want. Okay, so all that blabbering aside, I just wanted to answer a few questions from the comments I've been getting. So now I'm thinking so I put these 2 things in yesterday. These are both like tuck spot and pocket. So I need something to go in here, and what I'm thinking about is making a collaged kind of tag to go in there. So the way I will get started, I think, is just with gluing a couple of the pages from my glue book together. Then, what kind of background paper do I want? I'm going to pull from scraps. Hold on. And I'm super obsessed with this parchment right now. My hand-dyed parchment. I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. So, I'm going to cut a couple pieces of it here, just to be like the width of the tag. And, so let's just glue the parchment down. And I think I'll actually pull this out. And this book is The Secret Garden. It's one of the stories in the glue book, so I'm actually okay if the text shows through. I know that it's nothing that's going to be weird or offensive or anything. So okay, so now we just want to probably trim this down to a tag size. I'm just going to do that by going up against the text here. And I just have to get an idea for how wide I can make this. So it needs to go in this pocket. So probably here-ish. And you can use a trimmer to cut this super straight, but I don't think I'm too bad at cutting, so I think we're okay. Then I'm going to just shorten it a bit. I don't want it to be super tall. Okay. And then I am going to just straighten it out a little because I did go a little crooked here. There we go. That's not too bad. And I can use the bottom of the page here. Okay, so now we can begin to collage on there. And I'll cut it into a tag shape probably after. Yeah, so that'll fit pretty perfectly. And I don't have to even make it into a tag shape necessarily. So the things I'm thinking I want to put on here, I really like this image of these curls, combing out curls. This is from the vintage book. That. I might grab one of my girls here. This is from the vintage hairstyling book. I just gave her a little bit of a nose job. Made her a little pointier nose. Okay. Okay, so there we go. So I might pop her on the bottom, kind of, and all these thoughts might be coming out of her mind. And then I love these images of these eyes. Seeing all these images of these eyes makes me have this bittersweet memory, mostly bitter. So I went when I was a kid, like, well, not a kid, but I was probably like 19, into this antique store in my hometown. And I wasn't into antiques like huge, you know, at that age, but I did collect interesting things. At that age, I was building my own first kind of apartment of my own, kind of, when I had a little bit of money, because I was working like 3 jobs at the time and going to school. It was a little crazy. So I went into the antique store and I saw this really cool sign that was like a big pair of glasses with eyes in it. Like it was probably an old optician sign. And since then I have seen this same kind of sign in like an antiques like book about, you know, collectibles and things. So I didn't pick it up because it was, I think, like $175, which was a lot of money to me at that time. And so there was no way I was going to get it, but I really loved it. And I hemmed and hawed over it for like probably 45 minutes and ended up leaving without it. And now I still am haunted by it. Like, why? Why didn't I get that? Because I still want it. If I ever see it again, which might happen, we never know, I will definitely be picking it up because I just love it and I still think about it. This always happens to me, is I feel haunted by like things I didn't get at the time. So I don't think I will make this into a tag. I kind of like that I'm just kind of freeform sticking this down. It kind of reminds me of like a lot of teenagers, how they decorate their room, myself included. When I was a kid, when I still lived with my parents, I wanted to put like magazine images up on my wall. I was really into like 17 magazine and those kind of magazines. And so my parents were like, well, you can't be like putting this directly on the wall. So what I did was I bought a ton of pieces of Bristol board, like enough to wallpaper all the walls in my room. And I collaged on them from all of my 17 magazines, my Teen Beat kind of magazines, all these, you know, boys and girls and, you know, things that I thought were cool. And my walls were just completely covered in that kind of thing. And it was pretty fun. Okay, and I had a very small room. And because my parents live in a very old building from the 1800s, where they still live there, and they love it. And my dad manages this building basically, so that was his job. And yeah, so my room was very small because of just the construction of old buildings. And I was crazy about pets at the time, so I had I had hamsters, I had dagoos, I had fish, I had a lot of pets at the time. I had a rabbit, I had dogs. So my room was always full of life. And then I had music, and after a few years, I had my own little TV in my room. And it was pretty fun. You appreciate those kind of things, you know, when like you're limited. Like I feel like that it was a good time to, like, you didn't have a lot of expectations during the age that I grew up in, like the 80s. Okay, so now I need to back this. I will use this misprinted digital to do that. Alright, I think I'm just going to put a stitch around this and then it will be done. And I think that's all that I have time for today, because I have a full day ahead of me of stuff that I have to do. So this is going to get stitched around. I don't know, I might put like some kind of a lace or a tab up here. And then it's going to pop right on in here. I'll probably end up finishing this signature today and moving on to the next one. And we have 2 more to go until this book is finished, and then I'll be doing the flip through and it will be heading into my Etsy shop. So thank you for hanging out with me. I'm really happy to have you here. Hopefully I answered your questions a little bit about how I build journals and my aesthetic and my thoughts on things. If you do have any other questions that you'd like me to, you know, pitch in about, I'm always happy to, because I like to talk to you. So it helps me, honestly, when I'm making my videos to have things to talk about. It's a good thing. So anyways, have a lovely day, and thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet subscribed, I would really appreciate if you did. We're getting so close to almost 1,000 subscribers, which will be great, because then we'll be able to kind of grow our community a little more and have more people to chat with. So thank you so much, and take care. Be safe. Bye for now.